West Wing actors Martin Sheen and Bradley Whitford told CNSNews.com at a press conference on Capitol Hill that the Employee Free Choice Act, also known as the card check legislation, does not get rid of the secret ballot for workers who want to unionize. Under current law, workers can vote for or against unionization through a private ballot election, supervised by the federal government. However, under the proposed Employee Free Choice Act, if more than 50% of employees at a business publicly sign a card, the government would have to certify the union, and a private ballot election would not take place. The proposed bill says, quote, if the board finds that a majority of employees in the unit appropriate for bargaining has signed valid authorizations designating the individual or labor organization specified in the petition as their bargaining representative, the board shall not direct an election, but shall certify the individual or labor organization as the representative described in subsection A.
Mr. Sheen, as an observer and hearing all these stories, I want to see what your opinion would be on, do you think workers should have the right to a private ballot against, or a private ballot for when unions are trying to unionize their jobs?
Well, that's a guaranteed right and is supported by the National Labor Relations Board, but we all know that in the workplace there is such intimidation when a union organizer shows up or tries to get people interested in organizing. So I understand. Correct me if I'm wrong, but the reason you're asking this question, you're saying that forecloses this legislation? Is well, that right? Why are you asking this question?
In the legislation, some of the issues in it are the secret ballots.
No,
the issue with the secret ballot.
It's not an issue with this. You really have to be specific in knowing what this bill is about.
This bill does not get rid of the secret ballot.
On the contrary, it's their choice. It's not the employer's choice. That's the difference.
But if you're saying, how do we feel? I'm not speaking for Martin.
Please do.
God forbid.
And quickly too.
And quickly. No, but the notion that the labor movement is out to abolish their own members' rights to a secret ballot, just it doesn't pass the laugh test. And the people who are propagating the rumor that it does, their sudden compassion for workers' rights is just not believable.
It's always been true that workers can form unions one of two ways. They can form a union through majority sign-up or card check, or through petitioning for an election to the National Labor Relations Board. That's been true since 1935. The only thing the Employee Free Choice Act changes is it says that choice should be the workers, not the bosses.
Mary Beth Maxwell, executive director of American Rights at Work, who joined the West Wing actors, said the bill does not allow the federal government to dictate employees' wages or benefits if the company cannot reach a contract with the union. But the bill says the arbitration panel, known as the Federal Mediation and Conciliation Service, quote, shall render a decision settling the dispute, and such decision shall be binding upon the parties for a period of 2 years, unless amended during such period by written consent of the parties.
We talked earlier about the government requiring the mandatory government arbitration of employment contracts, and if a union and an employer fail to agree on a contract after 90 days, and we talked about that a little bit earlier, but wouldn't that mean that the government will dictate the wages and the benefits of employers in that specific business? Do you think the federal government should have the power to do that?
That's not what the bill does. That is not
what does it do?
It's just misconception and misinformation about the bill. There's no government imposed contracts or anything like that. It creates an incentive for workers and the employers to sit down together and get to a first contract. And let me tell you, there's studies that show in the public sector where this works, in Canada where this works, people actually rarely ever get to the step of needing to use arbitration because it just creates an incentive for the two parties to get together and come up with an agreement. number one. Number two, studies also show that there's substantively very little difference between contracts where people have to use mediation and arbitration and contracts where they don't. It's right now, the current system creates an incentive to not get to an agreement. And the only thing the Employee Free Choice Act does is it gets two parties to the table and says, let's roll up our sleeves, let's talk about it, let's get to an agreement.
If you're asking if it's I'm sorry.
No.
Go ahead. If you're asking if it's a secret way to turn us into a socialist government, the answer is no. It's an absurd misunderstanding of unions are a necessary part of capitalist enterprise, and it's ironical to me that we're living in a time where we have deregulated, compromised workers' rights to the point, and deregulated, whether it's banking oversight or anything, to the point where we actually now can't do anything until we talk to our loan officer in Beijing. We have a communist banker. That's where deregulation got us. It's like Ayn Rand got loaded and woke up next to, Keynes. So this notion that protecting workers' rights is at odds with capitalist enterprise is absurd.
Nicholas Ballasy, CNSNews.com, Washington.